Welcome to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be grading every Atlantic Division team's offseason. In this podcast, I'll be grading every Atlantic Division team's offseason so far and what they could do to improve. Boston Bruins, D. The Boston Bruins really haven't done anything to improve their team. In fact, I would argue that they got worse, especially with Patrice Bergeron's status for next season unknown. They were a non-factor at the draft and did nothing to address their obvious weakness at the center position. The one move that they did make was acquiring Pavel Zacha from the New Jersey Devils for Erik Haula. This deal could work out really well for the Bruins if Zacha pans out. If he does not, they will have a major weakness at the second line center position. Moving forward, the Bruins need to re-sign Patrice Bergeron and Pavel Zacha, but in order to do so, they will need to move both Nick Foligno and one of Derek Forbort or Mike Riley. At this point in time, the Bruins have had a terrible offseason. Buffalo Sabres, B-. The Buffalo Sabres had an excellent draft this year, landing players such as Matthew Savoie, Noah Ostlund, Yuri Kaluchik, Topias Lenonen, Victor Kuchev, and Mats Lindgren, which adds to their already stacked prospect pool. In free agency, Buffalo was not busy, but they did make some key signings with Eli Labushkin and Eric Comrie, which gives them some much needed depth. Buffalo also re-signed Victor Olofsson to a steal of a contract, a 2-year deal at $4.75 million per season. A great deal for a 2-time 20-goal scorer. The Sabres also acquired Ben Bishop and a 7th round pick from Dallas for basically nothing. I like what the Sabres have been doing this offseason, and I don't anticipate them adding any more players in the offseason because they need to give their players playing time. Although Buffalo did not make any major splashes, they had a great draft and have set themselves up to be a contender in 2 years. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at hockeywiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on anchor.fm/hockeywiz777scouting. Detroit Red Wings, A. Life is better when Steve Yzerman is your GM, isn't it? Detroit had a great draft this year, drafting Marco Kasper, Dylan James, Dmitry Bolchnikov, Anton Johansson, and Amadeus Lombardi, which adds to the already stacked prospect pool. In free agency, Detroit signed forwards Andrew Kopp, David Perron, and Dominic Kubalik, as well as defensemen Ben Sherratt, Oli Mata, and goaltender Ville Husso. Even with all these additions in the offseason, Detroit still has over $10 million left in cap space, and if they are in the playoff race, would have even more cap space to make moves to make the team a legit contender. Detroit seems done making additions to the team this offseason, as the team seems to be a very competitive team for next season. The Red Wings had arguably the best offseason of any team in the NHL, and are a much better team than what they began the offseason with. Florida Panthers, C+. The Florida Panthers might regress next season because not only did they lose key free agents such as Claude Giroux, Ben Sherratt, and Mason Marchment, they decided to make a ridiculous trade offer for Matthew Tkachuk, which included last year's leading point scorer, Jonathan Huberdeau, and their second best all-around defenseman, Mackenzie Weegar. The trade was a sign-in trade, and the contract was an 8-year deal worth $9.5 million per season, which is an overpayment considering before last year, Matthew Tkachuk only had one season with 70+ points. Looking ahead, Florida does not have any first-round picks for the next 3 years, which will be an issue because their prospect pool will be severely depleted, and they don't have much cap space left either. In free agency, the Panthers signed Colin White, who was bought out by Ottawa, Rudolph Valkers, Nick Cousins, and veteran defenseman Mark Stahl. Florida is $3.3 million over the cap, so they will need to move some players in order to be under the cap. In my opinion, the Florida Panthers did not have a great offseason and are a worse team than they were last season. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. Montreal Canadiens, B. The Montreal Canadiens had an excellent draft this year, adding prospects such as Juraj Slafkovsky, Philip Mesar, Owen Beck, and Lane Hudson, which will make their prospect pool much better. Also at the draft, the Canadiens made a blockbuster trade for Kirby Dach, which sent Alexander Romanov to the New York Islanders, and the Islanders' first-round pick to the Blackhawks. In another trade, Montreal traded Jeff Petrie to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Michael Matheson and a 4th-round pick in 2023. This trade benefits both teams because the Penguins are trying to win now, while the Montreal Canadiens are rebuilding, so Jeff Petrie doesn't quite fit the team anymore. An overlooked trade for the Canadiens was acquiring Evgeny Dadonov from the Vegas Golden Knights for the contract of Shea Weber. Dadonov has a chance to have a much better year with Montreal than his 2 previous years combined because he fits Montreal much better. Montreal isn't likely to add any other player in free agency, but they may be looking to move one of their veteran wingers such as Brendan Gallagher, Mike Hoffman, or Jonathan Drouin. Montreal has done a real solid job this offseason of riding the ship in the right direction. Ottawa Senators. A. The big splash the Ottawa Senators made this offseason was trading for Alex DeBrincat, who already had 2 40-plus goal campaigns in his 5 seasons in the league. In addition to adding DeBrincat, Ottawa signed Claude Giroux, who was born not far from Ottawa. Adding Giroux and DeBrincat gives Ottawa a dangerous top 6 and instantly makes them a force to reckon with offensively. Pierre Dorion worked his magic and somehow got the arch-rival Maple Leafs to take Matt Murray, then subsequently acquired Cam Talbot from Minnesota, who did not want to back up Marc-Andre Fleury. Ottawa still needs to re-sign some key RFAs like Alex Formenton, Eric Brandstrom, and Matthew Joseph, but they should be able to do so as they still have $10.8 million left in cap space. The Sens have had a terrific offseason and are possibly the most improved team in the league. Listen to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Check out my YouTube channel at Lucas Aoyang. Tampa Bay Lightning, B+. The Tampa Bay Lightning did a terrific job of retaining the majority of the team from last year, with the exception of Ryan McDonagh and Andre Palat, given that they did not have much cap space to work with. To make cap space, the Lightning traded Ryan McDonagh to the Nashville Predators for Phil Myers and Grant Mishmash. This trade freed up $4.25 million in cap space, and Phil Myers is still a player that can turn his career around with Tampa Bay, as he is just 25. Tampa locked up a few players long-term: Mikhail Sergachev, Anthony Cirelli, Eric Cernak, and Nick Paul. In free agency, the Lightning brought back former Lightning Vladislav Namestnikov and signed veteran defenseman Ian Cole. Tampa Bay should be done adding players this offseason as they don't have any cap space left. Given what the Lightning had to work with, they have done a great job this offseason and will remain a serious threat to win the Stanley Cup. Toronto Maple Leafs, C-. The Toronto Maple Leafs came into this offseason needing to address their goaltending issues and got even worse after losing Jack Campbell to the Edmonton Oilers and trading away Peter Mrazek to clear cap space. To address their goaltending situation, the Maple Leafs got clever and got Matt Murray for basically nothing and signed Ilya Samsonov in free agency. Besides losing Jack Campbell in free agency, Toronto also lost Ilya Mikheyev, who signed with Vancouver. To make up for the loss of Mikheyev, Toronto signed Kalle Jarnkrok, Adam Gaudette, and Nicholas Aube-Kubel, which will give them some depth in their bottom 6. Toronto needs to add more secondary scoring, but they don't have the cap space, so they will need to get creative and move one of their big contracts like Jake Muzzin. Because the Maple Leafs had a poor offseason, they are in worse shape than they were last season. In my next podcast, I'll be grading every Metropolitan Division team's offseason.